The flyers appeared overnight. They were stuck to telephone poles and slipped under doors, printed on glossy black paper with blood-red letters. They announced the grand opening of the subterranean waxworks. No address was given, only a cryptic website where you could bid for a spot on the Midnight Terror Tour. The site was dark and full of shadows, showing glimpses of twisted wax figures that looked a little too real for comfort. It promised an experience so frightening, so intense that it would change you forever. Of course, for kids at Northwood High, that sounded less like a warning and more like a challenge, a dare to see who was brave enough to enter. My friends and I were hooked instantly. Liam, who always acted tougher than he was, pooled all his summer job money. Maya, who loved horror movies but always watched them through her fingers, chipped in what she could. And me? My name is Jake. I'm the one who usually says, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" But even I couldn't resist the pull of the mystery. The bidding was fierce. We watched the numbers climb higher and higher, a digital auction for a nightmare. Finally, with seconds to spare, Liam slammed his fist on the keyboard, placing a winning bid that left our wallets completely empty, but secured us 4 tickets to the most exclusive scare in town. The night of the tour arrived, a thick fog clinging to the streets like a damp shroud. We received a text with a single address, leading us to a deserted alleyway behind an old, forgotten warehouse. A single steel door, rusted and imposing, was marked with a barely visible W. There were about a dozen other people there, mostly college students with cocky grins, all trying to look like they weren't scared. A figure in a long hooded cloak emerged from the doorway, their face hidden in the shadows. They didn't speak. They just collected our digital tickets with a pale, long-fingered hand and then gestured for us to descend the steep, crumbling concrete stairs into the darkness below. The air grew cold and damp as we went deeper underground. The smell of melted wax, dust, and something else, something sweet and metallic, filled our lungs. It was the kind of smell that stuck to the back of your throat. Down here, the sounds of the city vanished completely. All we could hear was the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the oppressive silence and the nervous shuffling of our own feet. The cloaked guide led us to a heavy iron gate, pulling it open with a groan that echoed down the long, dark corridor ahead. The tour was about to begin, and the knot in my stomach tightened. I already wanted to go home. The first room was called the doctor's office. It wasn't like any doctor's office I had ever seen. The wax figure of the doctor had a wide, unnatural smile stitched onto his face, his glass eyes gleaming under the single flickering light bulb. He held a rusty saw in one hand. On the operating table in front of him lay another figure, its chest cavity wide open, revealing organs made of glistening colored wax. The details were sickeningly perfect. Maya let out a small gasp and grabbed my arm, her knuckles turning white. The college kids laughed, but their laughter sounded forced and a little shaky. It was just wax, I told myself. It was all just wax. We moved from one disturbing scene to another, each room more unsettling than the last. There was the playground, which featured wax children with empty eye sockets sitting on swings that moved ever so slightly on their own. Their painted-on smiles seemed to mock us as we passed. Then came the family dinner, a scene where a wax family sat around a table, their faces frozen in silent screams. The food on their plates looked disturbingly real, but it was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if they had been sitting there for 100 years, trapped in a single moment of absolute terror. Every detail was designed to get under your skin. The tour guide, still silent, led us down a hallway lined with individual figures in glass cases. A ballerina whose feet were twisted backwards. A firefighter whose skin seemed to be melting off his face. A clown with long, sharp, pointed teeth. One of the college guys, trying to show off, pressed his face against the clown's case, fogging the glass. "Pretty spooky," he said with a smirk. But as he pulled away, I could have sworn I saw the clown's head turn. Just a fraction of an inch. Its painted eyes following the guy as he walked away. I blinked, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me in the dim, pulsing light. The further we went, the more the line between fake and real started to blur. The air wasn't just cold anymore. It was unnaturally icy in certain spots, raising goosebumps on my arms. We heard faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves, too soft to be part of any sound system. Liam, who had been boasting all week, was now quiet, his eyes darting nervously into every dark corner. The museum was doing its job. It was terrifying. But a new, more chilling thought began to creep into my mind. This felt like more than just a show. It felt wrong. The feeling that something was truly wrong hit me in the room called The Audience. It was a small, dark theater with rows of seats filled with wax figures, all staring at an empty stage. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and serious. Our guide directed us to walk across the stage to get to the next exhibit. As we stepped into the spotlight, I felt it. The weight of their stares. It was just an illusion, of course. They were wax. But as I glanced over the silent crowd, their glassy eyes seemed to follow my every move. They didn't just look real, they felt real. They felt like they were watching us, waiting. Suddenly, one of the college girls screamed, "It moved!" "I saw it!" she cried, pointing at a figure in the front row, a woman in a feathered hat. Her hand, it moved. The guy didn't react. The college guy who had taunted the clown laughed it off. "You're just seeing things," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. We all stared at the woman in the feathered hat. She was perfectly still, her wax hands folded neatly in her lap. But for a split second, I thought I had seen it too. A twitch, a tiny, unnatural movement that didn't belong in a room full of statues. The air grew thick with tension. That's when Maya noticed the smell again. "It's stronger in here," she whispered, clutching her nose. It was that same sweet metallic scent from the entrance, but now it was much more potent, almost overpowering. It reminded me of a butcher shop. I looked closer at the figures in the audience, trying to see what was different. Their skin wasn't smooth and shiny like the others. It had pores. It had tiny imperfections. It looked less like wax and more like, well, it looked more like skin. A horrible, unthinkable idea began to form in the back of my mind, so awful that I tried to push it away. Then Liam saw it. He was standing near the edge of the stage and let out a choked gasp. He pointed toward a figure of a man in a tweed suit. "His ear," Liam stammered, his face pale as a ghost. "Look at his ear." I followed his trembling finger. A small trickle of dark reddish-brown liquid was seeping from behind the figure's ear, running down its neck in a slow, thick drip. It wasn't wax. It was dark and sticky, and it looked exactly like old, dried blood. The show was over. This wasn't fake. The sick, twisted secret of the museum was starting to reveal itself, and we were trapped in the middle of it. The cloaked guide finally made a sound. It was a low, guttural chuckle that echoed horribly in the silent theater. The figure turned, and as the hood fell back, we saw a face that was a waxy, scarred nightmare. "You have reached the final exhibit," it rasped, its voice like grinding stones. "The workshop." It pointed a long, pale finger toward a heavy steel door at the back of the stage. "This is where the art is made, and we are always looking for new material." The college students who had been laughing just minutes before were now frozen in terror. The exit was behind us, but the silent, watching audience seemed to block our path. Panic erupted. The tough college guy made a run for it, trying to push past the guide. But two of the wax figures from the front row stood up with a creak of old joints. They weren't wax at all. They moved with a stiff, jerky motion and grabbed him, their grips like iron. He screamed, a raw, terrified sound that was quickly muffled as they dragged him through the steel door into the workshop. We saw a flash of gleaming metal tools and heard a sickening thud before the door slammed shut, leaving us in stunned, horrified silence. The rest of the audience began to stir, their heads turning toward us with that same awful creaking sound. "Run!" Liam screamed, finally snapping out of his shock. We didn't need to be told twice. We scrambled backward, away from the stage, away from the rising figures. We stumbled over each other in a desperate flight back through the creepy corridors. The family dinner table was overturned. The children on the swings were gone. The clown with the sharp teeth was no longer in its case. The museum was alive, and it was hunting us. We could hear the slow, heavy footsteps of the figures behind us, their jerky movements echoing through the narrow halls, getting closer and closer. We are running now, running through the maze of wax and flesh, searching for the stairs that lead back to the real world. But every corridor looks the same. Every turn leads to another terrifying scene. I don't know if we'll make it out. The whispers are all around us now, and the sweet, sick smell is everywhere. We paid for the scariest tour, and we got it. The museum has a secret, all right. Its exhibits are real, and it's always looking for new additions for its collection. I can hear the footsteps getting louder. They are right behind us.